on this end.
Okay, no. So I'm going, and by the way, I'm gonna start this again. It was not recording. Mike, did you see that got kicked off of Zoom? I mean, off of Facebook. Hold it one sec. Um, and I do want to just stop on that first line too, because that first line that you just started is a tough line to just take in by itself. So give me one second. I'm gonna turn you up a little bit. Um, yeah, yeah, that line in itself is something that we gotta talk about. So all right. So when we take a look at when we take a look at the taking a look at the again, this is one of those tachat hashemesh, right? Under the sun, which is when I look around the world, um, that people are getting away with oppressing other people, and nobody is helping them. No one is. The word is menachem, which means comfort. But the structure of it's kind of interesting because it says no one is. I see the tears of the oppressed. No one's comforting me. The oppressor's power with none to comfort them. It almost seems like when you look at the structure of this, there's no one comforting the oppressors either. I mean, seriously, if you look at like the way we would structure something, I looked at it in Hebrew. I'm like, am I reading this wrong? Because the way it's laid up, it's like there's nobody to comfort either the oppressors or the oppressed, which I thought was interesting because maybe that is the intention of it. Maybe the intention of
Now with Hamas and the hostages.
what was that?
It reminds me of Hamas and the hostages.
Yeah, and
No one to
everybody in the
comfort
whole,
either one of them.
correct, and everybody in the entire region, everyone
Yeah.
that's suffering war, everyone in Ukraine and Russia. You
Oh
say,
yeah.
you say, what is going on? And what's interesting too is that there is something to this, which is that I was thinking about this the other day. This had come up in a conversation I was having with my kids that so many of the people we hear about who are molesting other kids or were molested themselves. I mean, it's almost like a guarantee. And you wonder, like, how do you break the cycle of abuse? How do you obviously you have to, but are the people who are doing bad things oftentimes so broken themselves that these things come out? And again, it doesn't excuse their actions. They have to be held responsible. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be penalties for, consequences and things like that. But you wonder sometimes.
Also, when you go to war, it costs the people that goes to war too.
Yeah.
Costs
Yeah.
them both.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who, on the oppressor side too, that are broken, and they're broken from what they've done. Right. So it's, I read it.
The
I read it
world
the other.
isn't
I read
divided
it the
into
other
broken
day. I
people
read
and
it the other day
oppressors.
with an interesting view, which is maybe they're talking about both the oppressed and the oppressors. There's no one comforting anybody. But there's definitely a bleakness here, right? There's definitely a feeling of, well, is there anything happening here? Well, of course, the question um, is God doing it, right? Because the obvious thing is, well, what are you talking about? What are you doing? Are you comforting those people? Are you doing anything? Because it doesn't say God's not doing it, but you assume that the reason that it's here is because the person who's writing this, he or she is making a comment about the system, right? The system's broken. There's something wrong with the way things are happening, and that there is no comfort for the oppressed. Again, just looking at it from the simple understanding that the people who are suffering, no one is helping them. So the accountability seems to be God, God's not stepping in and doing anything. Now, that's the way we understand it on the most simplistic level, and that's obviously why it's here. It's part of the Bible because it makes some kind of theological statement. But it really is a question for us. I mean, how is it happening that this is happening and we're not helping those people who are oppressed? And at the end of the day, who's oppressing them? Who's oppressing them? We are. We're the oppressors. I mean, you can't say there's somebody is the oppressor. Some of the human beings are the oppressors. There's not, it's not God that's oppressing them. It's we're oppressing them, and no one's stopping it from happening, and no one's comforting even the people who are being oppressed. So the interesting thing about it is if you really think about it, if you really kind of get to this, it's you're the problem. The obvious thing is God's the problem. That's where most people end it. And then they just basically say, well, yeah, Ecclesiastes is saying no one's listening to your prayers, which is what scares the rabbis about this. But if you really think about what the writer just wrote, the consequences are you're the oppressor. That's what that's the answer. Because God isn't the oppressor. What do you mean? Like what? I mean, sure. The word Menachem, and by the way, that's the name. The name Menachem comes from this, right? It's the name, the comforter. We use that word in the prophets quite a few times. Yeah, I mean, look, the word comfort is a good translation. I mean, this is probably what the King James has, right? Comfort. Yeah. So it does have it's kind of the known word for it. The root for it is it's pretty simple. It's rest. The word, and it's the root for the name Noach, right? It means comfort, but it really means the comfort that comes from being left alone, from resting, from not being, but buffeted and tossed around. The word lanuach, to rest, to be at ease, to be serene, or whatever, that's what it's talking about. So when you think about, well, I got to give somebody comfort, it's really just like leave them alone. I mean, at the basic level of what the word means. I know I'm not saying that comfort is not a bad word, but it's really just, obviously it's making them so that they're at peace. You're doing something to them. Lachem menachem. You're making them menachem. So, yeah, I mean, it obviously means to protect them and to just keep them from being assaulted. That's what the concept is. So it's a yeah, it's a theological statement, but really it's a human statement, because who's doing the oppressing? Where's it coming from? It has to be coming from other people. So why aren't we stopping it from happening? Oh, well, we haven't, yes. We, we got, yeah, it's going to get bleaker. So this whole chapter is the whole chapter. All right, let's read a little bit more.
Then I accounted those who died long since more fortunate than those who are still living, and happier than either are those who have not yet come into being. and have never witnessed the miseries that go on under the sun.
That's pretty heavy. Yeah. Yeah, the whole thing is heavy because it's one of those lines where you get hit with the life sucks. It's better not to have, it's better to be dead. And then, oh, you know what? It's better never to have come into this.
Sounds like they belong in a facility with a lot of antidepressants.
Yes, but you could understand why I mentioned it last week. The rabbis discussed this. We actually read it on Wednesday night not too long ago. The rabbis discussed the meaning of existence, whether it would have been better for us to be here. And the rabbis came to the conclusion, yes, it would have been better for us not to have been created, but we are here. So we have to think that there's a reason for it, right? But they said, look, let's discuss it. They discussed it. All these great minds came together and said, yeah, it's better if we hadn't been here. Well, Ecclesiastes had said it. They knew Ecclesiastes. The rabbis knew Ecclesiastes said it. Now, what's interesting is that, of course, he says the ones who haven't yet come into being and the miseries, which is interesting because that does seem really bleak. I can read it another way, which is that the future doesn't have to be this way, right? If the people who haven't even had to experience, so it used to be bad, it's worse today, and it would be better if we didn't have to experience any of it. But maybe tomorrow, these miseries could be alleviated. It doesn't have to be like that because the people who haven't come here yet are going to come here. We assume they're going to come here. They haven't come into being, but maybe there's a way for them to come into a world where these things don't exist. By the way, that I think is the Jewish hope that we talk about, is that it doesn't have to be like this. That's where we say, what is different about this concept of Judaism is this idea that it doesn't have to be like that for the next people. Look, there's this recognition that it's really bad. You know who said this in the modern era pretty well too? The great Jewish philosopher Woody Allen said, life is filled with misery, loneliness. Oh, wait, misery, loneliness. He said misery, loneliness, and something else. And it's over much too soon. I think so. Life is full of misery, loneliness, and something else. And it's over way too soon. It's the same kind of thing. Right? It's terrible. And then it's over too soon. Trifurcated, because you can, the way I immediately go back to Noah, right? And God, I'm done. And given everybody a second chance. And then you can discuss, and then everybody say, shoot, that was a mistake too. Yeah. And then you can also say, well, what about us that, we had some challenges, but, like even in this little group, we had some challenges, but life's pretty stinky good. It's not like we've never been helped by yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what they come up with. You're right. So, and it's interesting you bring up the issue of no. Yeah, it's life is full of misery, loneliness, and suffering, and it's over much too soon. You have to have all three. Loneliness, misery, loneliness, and suffering. Which, by the way, is the same word here used, misery. But you're right. The Noah thing is interesting because, again, we came really close to wiping it all out, and then we don't have to have this anymore. Which, by the way, I'm not saying it's the greatest movie ever made because we know it wasn't, and I'm not going to argue about the merits of the film, but Darren Aronofsky's Noah with Russell Crowe is about that very issue because he follows the Midrash on this. He follows the Jewish text on it. Aronofsky talked about it. He didn't talk about it in detail because most people didn't know what he was talking about, but he really based it on Midrash, the story. And there's there's an important critical scene in that movie in Noah where he gets upset when he finds out that he's going to have a grandchild, and he tries to kill the woman carrying his grandchild because he says, no, humanity is over. We have a chance now we have a chance to end this so this perpetuation of suffering can be over. and he stopped from doing it. But it's a really critical moment because you realize in the Noah story how close we are to saying, yeah, maybe Noah, Noah realizes how messed up humans are. And he says, look, we got to stop this. The world doesn't need us. And then he stopped from doing it. And it's that critical moment of this, which is there's got to be something better. There's got to be an answer here. And so that's in the movie. Again, not the greatest movie, I'm not arguing, but it was really based on these kind of Jewish ideas that are in the text and also the ones that the text kind of asks us to come up with, which is the Midrash. So it was a very Midrashic movie on all levels. Very Midrashic because they even have Anthony Hopkins plays Methuselah in that. And that's based on the Midrash, which is that Methuselah died in the flood. What Methuselah's last breaths are taken as the flood is happening. So it's based very Midrashic. I mean, like deep Midrash on that. So yeah, the deepest Midrash is the ones that are the philosophical ones, which is what if Noah what if they had ended the line then? Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy that the Bible says that. There's a line in the Bible that says that. You have to deal with that. You have to deal with the fact that the Bible has that, which again, the rabbis felt uncomfortable with. Look, the rabbis had more of a problem with this than they did with Song of Songs. Song of Songs is erotic poetry. We read it. It's erotic. It's erotic. It's obviously erotic. They had less of an issue with that. They had an issue with it, but they had less of an issue with that than they did with this, because this is deeply troubling, but they had to keep it. They were forced to keep it. And then they had to figure out, again, how do we make sense of it? And we have to figure out how to make sense of it, because these are true statements. Do they have to be true? Do they always have to be true? I guess that's my take on it. It doesn't always have to be true. But again, there's also other parts of this that are just like, okay, well, how are we gonna get through it? You'll see. That's what this chapter is about.
I
Yeah.
have also,
Oh, yeah. So Mary just said sometimes the oppressor is ourselves, right? Oppressing ourselves. For sure.
I have also noted that all labor and skillful enterprise come from people's envy of one another, another futility and pursuit of wind.
By the way, that line, super insightful, super powerful. How much of our world is created because we're envious of somebody else? What motivates us to go to work? What motivates us to have a nice house? What motivates us? I saw that person and they had something. I got to get that. I got to work a little bit I got to work another year so I can get that. And he says it's useless. Think about it. You're being motivated by your desire to have what somebody else has. That's that's what's happening. When you really think about it, I am being motivated by my desire to have something that somebody else has. And he doesn't deny that, by the way, is the way people live.
And this is the day before commercials.
Yes. Well, we live in a world that, that forces us to ingest that, but they're calling it out. They're saying that's what's happening. The system when you think about it, that's what's at the root of the system, right? It comes from people's envy of another. That's amazing. That's truthful, though. That's so truthful. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? What's motivating me to do this? Because I got to keep up with that person. I got to earn what I have to have that in my bank account so I can go out and get that. That's what they just said. Correct. And it's useless. Can't do it. And that's another one of the words that they use for futility. The other word, well, I will say this is, he says another futility, gamzeh hevel, the word hevel that we have over and over again, vanity or futility. And then re'ot roach, which is a great phrase too, pursuit of the wind. Re'ut means, again, to be going after the wind, ruach. Yeah. Whew. That's a wonderful line because it's true. Powerful. All right. Here's the next. And again, this is all kind of connected. I mean, these lines are connected to each other.
True, fools fold their hands together and have to eat their own flesh. But no less truly, better is a handful of gratification than two fistfuls of labor that is pursuit of wind. And I have noted this further futility under the sun, the case of a man who is alone with no companion, who has neither son nor brother, yet he amasses wealth without limit, and his eye is never sated with riches. For whom now is he amassing it while denying himself enjoyment? That too is a futility and an unhappy business.
Which you can see that even in those days, you had people who were kind of miserly, a little bit like the Ebenezer Scrooge kind of person that, doesn't have anything to share, doesn't have anyone to share it with, right? Well, you do share it with other people. You can be miserly, we all can. But if we have somebody to share it with, then at least we can say we are, excuse me, we are bringing happiness to other people. Now, I will say that there's a caveat to this within the text as well. But because the text this is where you're going to say, well, yeah, this is kind of contradictory. But there is this understanding that, again, when it's only for ourselves, especially if we think that we need to get more, that's futility, right? The eye, we had this phrase before, right? The eye is never sated with riches, right? The eye cannot be sated because you can always see something else. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a great phrase because you can look around. You can always look around. And that's the line from Ecclesiastes, which, by the way, sometimes it's been quoted, and I used to quote it occasionally from Ecclesiastes for a funeral, only because it is also powerfully true. The eye never has its fill, right? The eye never has its fill, which essentially is, it doesn't matter how old you are. You always want to see more. You always want to experience more. It doesn't matter how long you live. There's always something to see. There's always something to do. It does. I mean, we say, well, this person lived into their 90s, lived to be 100, whatever. But I was with somebody last 2 days ago who's well into her 90s, and she does not want to. She's not stopping. She's not giving up. She does not want to stop at all. So there is this. I mean, this one, it's kind of used in a negative way, which is with riches, but the eye never having its fill, because the eye can't. The stomach can, the body can to some extent, but the eye never is. The eye can always see something more, right? Body has a limit, but not your stomach has a limit, but not the eye. Always see something new. So again, people denying themselves enjoyment too, right? They're amassing and they're not sharing it, and they're not even enjoying it. So that makes sense, right? That makes sense. Now we're going to get into this very famous line that's always misquoted, but we love it.
Two are better off than one, in that they have greater benefit from their earnings. For should they fall, one can raise the other. But woe to someone who is alone and falls with no companion to assist.
Yeah. When is that phrase used all the time? Not by me, but by other people. Anybody?
Marriages?
What?
Marriages?
Yeah. It's used all the time at weddings. Do you use that, Reverend Lynn? Two are better than one? It's used all the time. Okay, but this is more bizarre in a way, because people always quote this as being the Bible is saying how wonderful it is to have somebody with you. Yes, but the context of this clearly isn't a marriage. It's not a marriage. It's a business deal, which sometimes marriages are a business deal. But this is about a business deal. This is not about a couple. First of all, we know that because of the previous line that they're basically saying it's not good to be by yourself. This would then, well, maybe it's a spouse. But yeah, no, this is in a lot of pastoral wedding books. This line is used out of context. This is, well, oh yeah, oh yeah, but well, no, we're gonna explain where this comes. We're gonna explain where this comes from. But so no, they usually just use this phrase tovim hashanayim mina echad. That they just use that phrase. Two are better than one. But yeah, they usually don't necessarily. Well, they won't usually translate this as greater benefit from their earnings, right? What is the King James translation? Yeah, a good reward from their labor is much more open-ended. Good reward from their labor could mean the labor of their marriage, right? Their work that they do together as a couple helps both of them, right? So that is much more, well, it's much more open-ended. It's not necessarily, hey, this is about money, right? This is about business. It's definitely about business, right? And of course, it also can be understood, and it has been understood that, right, what happens? One should fall. Read that.
For should they fall, one can raise the other, but woe to someone who is alone and falls with no companion to assist. Further, when two lie together, they are warm. But how can someone who is alone get warm?
Yeah. Which also seems interesting because what are they talking about here? Are they talking about two guys lying next to each other? Yeah, it seems they are. It seems they are. They're talking about people that are lying next to each other when they're out in the fields or they're out on the road, that they keep each other warm. Body heat from somebody next door. Literally next body over, not next door, but next to them. So yeah, this was something that people talked about as well, I mean, that's where it gets complicated, where people say, well, I was only lying next to him to keep warm. But people talk about this. I mean, this is what, when people go down the rabbit hole of whether Abraham Lincoln was gay, he wrote about sleeping next to other guys, which again allowed people to go down that road. But the Bible says it. The Bible seems to be talking about people who are of the same gender. Doesn't seem like they're separate, but of course it could be. I mean, it doesn't mean that they are, but doesn't mean that they couldn't be from the same gender for sure. It seems like they are. Does not seem anywhere here that this is about a marriage, and especially this next line.
Also, if someone attacks, two can withstand it. A threefold cord is not readily broken.
Right. So two and one more is even better. Which again, are they talking about a throuple?
They're probably not talking about marriage.
Is this a throuple? No, this is not a throuple. No, because clearly this is about people working together as a team, as a corporation, a small corporation maybe, but three or more people working together, helping each other, supporting each other in business, probably. It's talking about having other people in your circle that you can rely on, your business partners, people that you're farming with, people that you're working with. And it's encouraging that. It's encouraging those kind of relationships. Now, what does somebody do when they're talking about, no, this is about couples. This is only about marriages, right? This is not about business. Why would the Bible talk about business? Well, the Bible would talk about business because that's what people did. But for people who wanted to say that every line of this is spiritual, what do they say? What do they say? There's three people, there's three individuals, or there's three entities in the marriage, right? The husband, the wife, and God.
And God.
Yeah, so the threefold cord is God in their relationship. And so that's what people use as a quote. And that is especially used. That's why this whole text can be used in more, I don't hear it too much in Orthodox weddings, but I definitely have heard it in more evangelical type marriages where they say the threefold cord is not broken, right? Not readily broken, not easily, but cannot really be broken. That's incorporating God into your marriage, which is not very rare. It's very rarely said at a reform or conservative wedding. Don't hear that. Don't hear that. I haven't heard that. I haven't used it myself. Bring God into the bedroom. Don't say that. Feels
Don't
uncomfortable.
There's a teaching about, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but The letters for man and woman, if you put them together without God, you get fire. But if you put them together with
Yeah,
God,
yeah. It's the Isha.
yeah.
Isha is God with the hay, represented with the hay. If you take out the hay, you're left with Aish, which is fire. So the woman, if you're with a woman without God, then you have a fire. If you have God with you, it's Isha. Yeah. Who told you that, Rosemary? I never told you that. I
Read
never
it
taught
somewhere,
that.
maybe.
What?
Maybe I read it somewhere.
Maybe. But yeah, it's kind of an excuse for it's kind of an excuse for saying that women are a problem unless you have God in your life, which is
Everything's a
it's more
problem
of
if
a
you don't have
caution
God in
for
your life.
what, say that again?
I said everything is a problem if you don't have God in your life.
Yeah, but reality, it's really talking about people who are concentrating on physical relationships and not a more spiritual relationship. So, for example, if they were talking to a young yeshiva kid who's being obsessed with sex, let's say,
Yeah.
dealing with a sex addiction, it would say, look, it's aish, it's fire unless you have God, unless it's a holy relationship. I mean, so that's kind of the context that it would be used. I mean, it's nice. It's a nice teaching when it's said from the standpoint of, like, the whole context of you living an Orthodox life. But otherwise, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting way to go. But yeah, the threefold cord, we don't quote that a lot. It's not you. I have not heard it actually ever during a Jewish ceremony, but I have heard it during Christian ceremonies, and I have heard it. I've seen it. I've seen entertainers or people who talk about how they have a better relationship now. Okay, 90% of them are country singers, but they'll say how they're in a better relationship now because because God's in their relationship with their new spouse, their second or third husband or second or third wife. Now that
Right.
Vince Gill is with Amy Grant, his life is much better. Those kind of things. You'll see that occasionally, but yeah, I mean, the reality is that people have interpreted this to make a statement about a marriage with God as part of it. But yeah, it's clearly, the context of it was clearly about business, but it's very often quoted. It's one of the lines of Ecclesiastes that is oftentimes quoted that you'll see. You'll see that written on a poster or written on somebody's wedding, program. But look at the whole context and also look at what else it's saying about this.
Better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer has the sense to heed warnings. For the former can emerge from a dungeon to become king, while the latter, even if born to kingship, can become a pauper.
Yeah. Keep going.
However, I reflected about all the living who walk under the sun with that youthful successor who steps into his place. Unnumbered are the multitudes of all those who preceded them, and later generations will not acclaim him either, for that too is futile and pursuit of wind.
Yeah. And that's where you get a line like, or those lines that seem to be like, God, that sounds like Solomon wrote that, or it seems like a Solomon type person could write that. These lines really do seem like that. And the way the Midrash understood it was that Solomon himself saw himself like this. He saw himself as an old, foolish king. He saw himself as somebody who could be duped. And so this is him talking about his own life. So the imagination in the Midrash is that Solomon wrote this as an older man. He wrote Song of Songs or Song of Solomon when he was a young man. He wrote Proverbs when he was a middle-aged man and was accumulating knowledge and wisdom. And then he wrote this when he was wise enough to know that he was kind of an idiot, kind of a fool, kind of a guy who was old and foolish. And what's going to come next? What's going to come next? Did he know? Oh, we say he's the wisest person ever. He could talk to animals. He could talk to angels and demons. And did he not know that the king that came after him, Rehoboam, would be a horrible king, his son? Did he know that there would be kings that came after him who would be absolutely abhorrent people, who did the worst things, including child sacrifice, and who did horrible deals with other kings and did just the worst behaviors? He knew that some of his descendants would be good, maybe, but he also maybe he foretold that this is what's going to happen. And maybe he knew it because he knew what happened to previous dynasties. He knew what happened before. He knew what happened in Egypt. He knew what happened in other parts of the world. This is what happens, right? That people get succeeded by people who squander everything that they've, all the good will and all the hard work that they had done before is gone. You turn it over to somebody. And again, there's this feeling like you don't have to just be a king. You can also be a parent. There's this understanding here, and you're going to see it flat out. You accumulate stuff and you turn it over to your kids. What's going to happen to it? You don't have to be a king to feel that way. You don't have to be a king to say, is this a good idea for me to give money to my kids? You're going to see it.
Be not overeager to go to the house of God. More acceptable is obedience than the offering of fools, for they know nothing but to do wrong.
Yeah, and that's the last line in chapter 4. By the way, chapter 5 kind of picks up, there's not necessarily a break in the next. But what's interesting about that last line is there's nothing in this book about sacrifice. There's nothing in this book about ritual observance. There's nothing in this book about keeping kosher or doing anything in a ritual way, except here. And the one line here is, you know what? Don't think that that's going to protect you. If you're a fool, it don't mean anything, right? Don't run down to the temple and go, I got to give my sacrifice. Because it's more important what you're doing, right, on a daily basis than your sacrifice. So the one place in here where they talk about ritual stuff, the stuff that the Leviticus talks about and the other parts of the Bible where it talks about your offering, your sacrifice, it's clearly what they're talking about. Now, look, some people interpret this to mean, heaven, the house of God is heaven. It's not. It's clearly a temple, and they're clearly talking about sacrifices. But they're saying, those idiots that are running to the temple to offer their sacrifice but are not thinking about their behavior, they're fools. It's a pretty powerful line. It's a pretty powerful line. Because, of course, the equivalent is, the people that run to synagogue and are going to say a prayer, they're coming to services to say a prayer, but they're not actually behaving well. So that's the one line about sacrifice in this book. And it's pretty much, don't think that that's going to save you. So the next line really kind of goes with it too.
Keep your mouth from being rash, and let not your throat be quick to bring forth speech before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth. That is why your words should be few.
Yeah, keep your mouth shut. Don't bother God. Don't bother God, because you're probably saying something stupid. Think about your place. Think about what you're doing. Think about whether it's something. And again, the rabbis definitely encourage that kind of behavior. They don't want people making oaths before God. They definitely discourage this. And this kind of lends itself to that, which is don't bring God into your deals. Don't say, God, if you'll only give me, this thing, I'll promise I'll do. Don't do that, right? Don't bring in God. And he's not your partner. So people often, I heard a comedian once talking about they were Catholic and they were talking about how they were different from Protestants. Protestants talk about praying to God and talking to God all the time, and She said, I was raised Catholic. You don't bother God with that kind of stuff. The priest told me you talk to a saint. You talk to a saint. You invoke an angel. Don't go bother God. Don't be bothering God. So yeah, there's a similar idea in Catholicism. She says, don't be bothering God with stuff. So that was a funny. I think there's some truth to that too. I think there was a statement about, you know, how you approach God, which is a similar idea, which it does exist in Judaism, which is don't be involving God in your stuff when it's not really godly stuff, So
Just as dreams come with much brooding, so does foolish utterance come with much speech. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it, for God has no pleasure in fools. What you vow, fulfill.
yeah. And so if you're going to do that, if you're going to make a vow, you better make good on it. So they don't want people to do it. This is kind of, again, it's a reminder of don't be running around promising God you're going to do things. Don't do that.
It is better not to vow at all than to vow and not fulfill. Don't let your mouth bring you into disfavor, and don't plead before the messenger that it was an error, but fear God, else God may be angered by your talk and destroy your possessions.
Yeah. That is a real feeling of let's not get God involved in this, right? Because once you get God involved in this, you're calling everything into question, right? You want to do that, you're going to get God involved with everything. And there's that feeling of humility of, I started getting God involved in, making these deals. So everything's going to start falling apart. So that's an interesting kind of, I don't know if it's superstitious, but there's definitely a feeling like you don't want to do that.
For much dreaming leads to futility and to superfluous talk. If you see in a province oppression of the poor and suppression of right and justice, don't wonder at the fact, for one high official is protected by a higher one, and both of them by still higher ones.
Yeah. What you see again in this chapter, as we're going through chapter 5, is a real feeling of, these things that we deal with are real, and they are, they're tough. It's tough. They're not easy. I mean, first of all, the system is broken, right? It's always been broken. There's a chain, bureaucracy that, again, everyone points to someone else and says, "Hey, it's not my problem." I can't fix this, and they're saying that's just the way it is. It's always been that way. Right? If you think that this is something new, it's always been there, and they said that back then. So there's a real feeling of futility here with the system, right? With the systems, the human systems that we create. But again, this goes even deeper. That when we try to dream about this stuff, that's no better either. So there's a real feeling like, again, where do you go? Where do what's going to be okay? How do we figure it out?
Thus, the greatest advantage in all the land is his. He controls a field that is cultivated. A lover of money is never satisfied with money, nor a lover of wealth with income. That too is futile.
And how do those two lines go together? Well, we're not sure what line 8, they're not sure with what line 8 means. But again, assuming it goes with the previous line, that, the best way of dealing with the system is to control it, right? Perhaps that's what they're saying. But they also could be saying is, worry about your own stuff. Don't be dependent on anything else. But then that goes with the next line, which is that it's not about the money. It's about being self-sufficient. But what seems to be the case, I'm not going to ruin it because the following lines kind of get to it, is that the real joy we can take in something is in enjoying that aspect of it and not thinking about it as that the accumulation of something, and we read about it last week too, is what we should be taking joy in. So not wealth for the sake of wealth. It's not wealth for saying I have something. You'll see the rest of this text.
As one's substance increases, so do those who consume it. What then does the success of its owner amount to but feasting the eyes? Workers' sleep is sweet, whether they have much or little to eat, but the abundance of the rich doesn't let them sleep. Here is a grave evil I have observed under the sun: riches hoarded to the detriment of the owners. And that those riches are lost in some unlucky venture, and if they produce children, they have nothing in hand.
So what's the purpose of earning money?
You get enough to invest, and then you blow it on some stupid investment, and your children end up with nothing.
And your children could also do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Provide for themselves. Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a feeling like that here. And that if you pass on money, right? If you're passing on money, what you're doing in the end is just, at best, you're passing on a problem to the next person. Because hoarding the riches, which is what they said, becomes it becomes a problem. If I have more money than I need, right? But within my means, what am I supposed to do with that money? The book of Ecclesiastes seems to be saying the best thing for us to do is to spend it and enjoy it. And here's why.
Another grave evil is this: the rich must depart just as they came. As they came out of their mother's womb, so they must depart at last, naked as they came. They can take nothing of their wealth to carry with them. So what is the good of their toiling for the wind?
So correct. And that's how we're different. So we were just talking about this the other day. Jewish burial practices. Judith, why don't you share what your cousin just wrote?
Oh, so I have a young cousin.
Actually, I have to use the restroom, and why don't you share this as you read it? Just read a little piece of this because it's very relevant to what we just said.
A piece of what Renana wrote?
Yeah, your cousin.
My cousin. Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, so my cousin is really smart. She's studying for her doctorate. She's about to defend it. And one of the things she recently wrote is a piece talking about Pope Francis's plan to have his funeral be as simple and basic as possible, is reflected by in Jewish funeral practices. She starts with saying that Pope Francis's funeral wishes reflect one of the famous Talmudic rabbis, Gamliel, and that when he was alive, he used to be that the rich would have these big fancy funerals and the poor would not. So the rich, the example that's given is the rich would take their dead out to be buried on a couch and wrapped in beautiful fabrics. But the poor used boards and a linen shroud, and that we should all, so as not to make the poor feel bad, but we should all use that style of funeral. I'm trying to think of the right words. He called me out here. And so she writes about, that during his life, Pope Francis was known for his care of the poor, the vulnerable, and those at the margin. So in line with this commitment, living a funeral life, simple life, he went against the traditions of papal funerals. Single wood coffin, instead of being raised up above the mourners, he was on a low pedestal, and that's the same, that it reflected his commitment to the poor in the same way that Rabban Gamliel did that, and that instead of the way other rabbis and other wealthy people and honored people had been treated after their death for their funerals, that we should all be, you can't take it with you, and you should all, as the lowliest, we should all go out as the same as the lowliest.
We changed Jewish burial practices,
and that
we established Jewish burial practices by the rabbis after that. So after Rabban Gamliel said, you get buried in a burial shroud and a simple coffin, or a simple shroud, and that's it. And then after that, they basically said, whatever the poor can afford, that's what the rich get. There's not going to be any difference in Jewish burial practices. And again, because the idea was that Judaism believed, and it's established here to some extent by this text, we all go to the same place. And so why pretend that because I was rich in this world that I have any extra stuff in the world to come? So that the burial shroud that we're buried in doesn't have pockets. Doesn't have pockets.
In Israel, are they buried in the shroud, or are they in the coffin? Are they in the coffin, in the shroud?
In a shroud.
They take them out of the coffin.
Out of the coffin, yeah. No one would know. Mm-hmm. The church. Oh, interesting. So Reverend Lynn just said the church, at Episcopal services, the coffin is always covered so that no one knows what the coffin is like, and that the flowers have to be outside the church. They can't be brought in. So you would know someone. Look, we never even had flowers at Jewish services until recently. And so, I was at a funeral yesterday where they placed a flower at the grave, which is not something that, again, it's not that you can't do it, but it's not something that was traditionally done. Nobody knew. You would never know. And the person who was buried yesterday was in a plain wood coffin. It was not like they didn't do a traditional coffin, but there's something very powerful about that, the plain coffin. And yeah, I mean, some of the wealthiest people I know who've passed were buried in a plain coffin, and it's a last statement of you can't take it with you. And so this text, establishes that. I mean, we saw it in Job too, that Job says, I'm going to go out the way I came in, in a fetal position, which is sometimes the way they buried people, in a fetal position. And that was like a further affirmation of this, right? As they came out of their mother's womb, so much they depart, which again seems to be naked, um, but people would be buried again, sometimes in the fetal position, just as like they were in the womb. So that seems to be based on some of the excavations we have. That's the way people were buried. So again, what's the purpose of money if you can't take it with you? And again, if the money is there, look, this is an issue which has become an issue again in the Jewish community, but it wasn't an issue. It wasn't an issue until recently. The Jewish community, and when I just was listening to an African American talking about learning from the Jewish community on how to accumulate wealth and amass wealth, how the Jewish community is successful. Yeah, again, being left alone, the Jewish community has been traditionally successful in America. Not every Jewish person is wealthy, but as a community, one of the reasons why the Jewish community has been successful here is because they've been left alone and have been able to accumulate stuff without having it being taken away from them when they got too successful. But the problem then still becomes now, how do we figure out how to take care of a next generation without making them not want to work, right? The thing we mentioned last week, the Buffett thing of, giving giving your children enough so they can have anything, but not too much that they want to do nothing. Okay, but it's becoming an issue now with the Jewish community that we've attained a level of success now where just basically, buying a home and being able to transfer a home and doing some other stuff means that the next generation is going to have $1 million. Yes, and again, when if I share that what this African American person said was that again, it's not been about understanding that you have to accumulate that, but is it? I would say that there's a fine line between amassing enough to help the next generation. But what we would say is the other piece of this, which I didn't hear his whole spiel, but one of the things that I would say that the Jewish community has done successfully is encouraged our young people to have the tools to be successful on their own, which means essentially in this country, college education, to be able to have the degree or whatever, the graduate degree, then to go on and be successful in their chosen field. I think to some extent, that's really kind of the limit. I mean, look, they didn't have that situation in the ancient world. They had other ways, giving somebody a field allowed them to cultivate. At least they didn't have to raise the money to accumulate the field. Their father traditionally gave them a field, and then they cultivated the field. That's essentially what we're doing by giving somebody a college education, is saying, we're giving you the field, we're giving you the tools, now be successful. We're not giving you so much that you don't have to work. And I think that's the fine line. That's the sweet spot that you have to be in, is that you don't give somebody so much money that they don't have to work. But that's starting to happen. You're right, John. It doesn't happen a lot, but it is happening. And so the Jewish community now is being faced with this issue. They weren't faced with this issue until the last 20 years. As a community, we are a small enough community where we can see it play out. We're watching it play out. It did not happen until the first few. It took a few generations for that to happen. Look, this is a discussion that's happening. It's not happening for everybody because most people are in that area where they're able to give their children something, but they're not able to give them again so much that they won't work at all. Look, I told you I had a discussion with somebody who was a billionaire the other day, and I thought about that. I mean, like, how do you keep your kids motivated? How do you keep your kids from working? Obviously, from not working. How do you inspire them to you basically have to tell them, you're not getting this money. This is not money that you're entitled to. but well, that's their kids are in their 30s, late 30s, so that it's not an issue. It's not an issue yet, but you wonder, it's like, do your kids want you to die so that they can inherit this money and never have to work again? Like again, you have to raise your kids with that sense that this is not what they're not entitled to money, and that's not going to be the way that they find success or meaning, is through having money. And that's what so this book is talking about. That's what Ecclesiastes is telling people, right? You can't assume that accumulating things is going to make you feel good. He says it's not the accumulation, and we read it last week too. The accumulation is not the way you measure success. And it's definitely not in having enough so you can say you died with it. We're going to read this. I mean, he gets to it.
Besides, all their days they eat in darkness with much vexation, grief, and anger. Only this I have found is a real good, to eat and drink and get pleasure with all the gains you make under the sun during the numbered days of life that God has given you, for that is your portion.
Yeah. So there's, again, some people say this sounds very Greek, but there is this understanding that what's the best we can do to enjoy our lives. Now, again, eating and drinking seems pretty clear. And getting pleasure, right, with the things that you've accumulated with your gains is much more open-ended. There's an understanding, of course, that we have a limited time here. There's not this is not this is too short, right? That's what the word numbered days means, you know? Correct. Yeah. So Scrooge just wanted more money. He didn't get any enjoyment out of it, and not whether or not he shared it with anybody, he didn't enjoy it. So it's definitely telling people you should enjoy your money. You should enjoy your life. You should turn your wealth into things that bring you enjoyment. Now, again, that doesn't mean that's stuff that takes advantage of other people, that hurts other people. That is enjoying your life. I get great enjoyment out of hunting live people, it's the most dangerous game. There's a limit, of course, to this, but enjoying the stuff that you have in your lifetime is what he says is the real good. It's not accumulating it for the sake of accumulating. It's not accumulating even necessarily to give it to somebody else. The accumulation of it itself is going to be problematic because you're going to keep it and you're going to wonder where's it going to go? He's saying enjoy it. So there's an interesting idea here, which is that, what should be your vision of where your money goes? How you spend your money. First of all, you spend it on yourself. Spend it on yourself. It says so. That's not greed. It's saying the only thing that's going to give you enjoyment is enjoying it, making sure that your life is comfortable, is good. It doesn't say you have to, again, hurt other people in the process. But enjoy it, and probably, again, make sure that you don't ruin your next generation by giving them too much. Help them, accumulate on their own, but don't give them so much that they're going to not want to work and have so much money that they're going to squander it themselves. Because if they're looking at their money as again, I inherited this money. It's an interesting thing, if you've ever inherited any money, if you've ever had a windfall from something, you think about it and you're like, well, how am I going to spend this money? What am I going to spend this on? And a lot of times people go, I'm just going to invest it. I'm going to spend it on I'm going to spend it on making more money, which, you know, again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, but there is this real feeling like, but what's going to happen with that money? At what point does that money, like, how much is enough? And I wake up with that, you know, I wake up sometimes and ask myself that question: how much is enough? What would you be comfortable? A little more. So I think people, you know, need to think about the fact that, you know, at least from our understanding of what Solomon, the wealthiest man in the world's understanding of it was, is that it was enjoying this world. It was enjoying the products of labor in this world, and not being sure, again, what's going to happen with anything else. What's going to happen with my stock portfolio tomorrow? I don't know, but I'm going to enjoy my money today, and I'm going to live my life however many days I have, which are not going to be enough. I mean, he says that they're numbered. I mean, that's another weird thing too. It's like, where do I know, you know, how many years I get to live? I don't know. And again, people have to be careful. You know, I want to spend all my money now so I don't have any money when I'm older. There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee. You can't say, well, I got to make this last till I'm 90. Really? How do you know that? You don't know that. You're not guaranteed anything. Very delicate. It's something I think about all the time. I probably think about it too much. Look at.
Also, whenever
Well, wait, hold a second, Rosemary. So yeah, so John, you're saying you don't think about it until you get to a certain age. Yeah. International Dance Day. Reverend Lynch told us this is the dance, though. This is the dance that we're all doing. Think about that, John. Though it's international. You better tell your wife it's International Dance Day tonight. Okay, no, but yeah, we have a it's a very precarious situation, and we know that it's a very fine line. It's not knowing, but this idea that you're guaranteed a certain amount of time is also not something we can be sure of, right? Here's what the chapter ends with this.
Also, whenever people are given riches and property by God, and they are also permitted to enjoy them and to take their portion and get pleasure for their gains, that is a gift of God. For such people will not brood much over the days of their life, because God keeps them busy enjoying themselves.
Now that's a wonderful line. Now that is the simplistic way of thinking, gosh, if I could live like this, aspire to live like this, right? I understand it's a gift. Understanding it's a gift. I've been lucky. However you want to look at it, whatever you want to say the gift is, you know, I was extremely fortunate. You got the greatest blessing of all. You were born into a country, into a time when you're enormous wealth and opportunities for wealth and everything else. Whatever, if you want to say that's a gift from God, fine. It's a luck lottery ticket, whatever you got, it's a gift from God. And what you really have is hopefully the ability to enjoy it, get pleasure, you know, with your portion. And again, if you can do that, you're not going to have a lot of, well, he says brooding. That's the way it's challenged, you know, one way of looking at it. But what's the it's not really it's not a really accurate translation. I know I have a feeling with the with the King James, it's going to be confusing, but what does the King James say, Mary, for line 19? For such people, they will not, oh, line 20 on yours? Okay, what is this? Yeah, remember is the way they translate it. Brood is probably a better way of looking at it, because remembering, I mean, seems to be like you want to remember it, but brooding over it seems to be the better translation. It's not being obsessed with it. not thinking about it all the time, which I do. I think, as I just admitted, I think about it too much. But there's this, what do you do? What do you do to stop from doing that? Enjoy yourself. Be happy. Make yourself happy. Fill your life with happiness, with simcha. That's the word, simcha. Make your heart, simchat libo, make your heart and mind happy.
Mark.
Keep it happy. Because what that's doing is not only enjoying your life, right? Spending your money on the things that you need to have to make yourself happy, but it also literally keeps you from the opposite, which is obsessing over it, thinking about it, looking at the bank account, looking at the stock portfolio, spending your time thinking about how this is going to play out. How many days? How much longer is this going to last for? How do I have enough money to keep this going? Again, you got to be responsible. I mean, no one's saying you be responsible and not thinking about, I'm going to spend my money and if I last long. No one's saying that. But there is an obsession with it. There is somebody who's thinking about it all the time, which is why they translate it as brooding about it. But how do you do that? By keeping yourself active, by working towards those goals, by saving towards those goals if you have to. But doing the goals are to have fun. The goals are not just so that I can say I have that kind of money, but that I enjoy it. So it's a very interesting take. And I think it's really true. I mean, the older I get, the more I think this is 100% true. Because, well, not only is this ancient wisdom, not only has this been proven, and as long as we live in a world where we have to work, I mean, maybe we're getting to a point where we're not going to work anymore, by the way. They're saying we're working towards a time when everything is going to be leisure activities because we're going to have AI and robots doing all of our work for us. But until we get to that point, yeah, we're close. We can see it almost. But until we get to that point, we have to still balance it out, and we have to get to a point. Now, what's so weird is that this was written thousands of years ago before people retired. They never retired. But there was a point in time where they didn't go out in the field anymore. There's a point in time where they hired other people, or the next generation worked the field and they took their cut. So they didn't have a retirement per se. Yeah. They didn't have retirement per se, but there were ways of enjoying life. Now, they didn't go on a cruise. They didn't, 3,000 years ago, they didn't go on a cruise necessarily, but they understood there was a time in life where we can sit down and have a banquet and we can have some friends over. We have fun. They did it. That's what they did. And that's what they're telling you to do, was that life could be filled with good things. Life could be filled with enjoyment, with simcha, with fun, with joy.
Mark.
It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful vision. And it's one that we should really pay attention to, because many people just run around and they're not really sure what they're doing. And the Bible actually talks about it. And what's funny is it's not really that hard. I mean, again, it's tricky. It's not like I'm saying it's easy. It's a very fine line. As John said, it's a dance, but it can be done, and it definitely should be thought about. There definitely should be some thought given to it. What are you doing? How is this the way I want this stuff to play out? And definitely when we get to this stage in life, most of us have gotten to this stage. Everyone in this class is, yes. Everyone on this class,
Mark.
And everybody who's here, and again, we have a full group today, and 10 people or 10 computers online, and however many people are still on Facebook right now. Yeah, think about it. Every one of us almost is sitting in this situation right now where we're thinking about what we're gonna do today, and how that's part of the way we're gonna spend this part of our life, these chapters of our lives. So let's read a little bit more.
Mark, before we move on, Mark.
Yeah.
We're talking here a lot about people who God has given a gift to, right? What about the people that God didn't give that gift to?
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because
about that?
Well, what's interesting is that, think about this though, Judith. The the reality is that anyone can achieve enough money to um to enjoy yeah. Well, no, I mean, look, no, but so what, look, today we would say there's a huge difference between, there's a huge difference between, obviously, the wealth disparity we have right now is a real problem. I mean, it's a huge problem, right? So we know that there's tremendous wealth disparity. But what's interesting is that almost everybody, almost everybody, unless they have food scarcity issues, almost everybody has the ability to eat and drink and to enjoy basic ways of having. I mean, that's what it's saying. Eating and drinking and pleasure, right? That's what it said. So almost everybody can do that. It doesn't say that you have to have a car or you have to have whatever the equivalent today that is the marker of the next level of wealth. Or again, you go on a cruise and you get to travel to Spain or whatever it is. Oh, I meant to send this to everybody. But there is a reality that it doesn't necessarily take a lot to live a happy life. Almost everybody can do that. Almost everybody can, again, unless they don't have food, which there are people. But I mean, even people in a shelter have food. Again, I know it's not necessarily the best food or the stuff but almost everybody can do this. Eat and drink and get pleasure. I mean, almost everybody can do that. I just shared the article that Judith Cousin wrote for Pope Francis. So I just shared it in the chat. It's a really good explanation of Jewish traditions on burial, which again, Francis kind of brought it out. Made us think about. All right, so we're going to finish with chapter 6, and this is a kind of a good way. Now, we don't have class next week or the week after. I was thinking maybe we'd finish Ecclesiastes before, but it's fine. On the other end of Ecclesiastes, right? On the other side of Ecclesiastes, the next book of the Bible that we're going to get into is Esther, and that we're going to read, in a few weeks, and it's going to be uninterrupted. We're going to miss for any times, but the next 2 weeks we're off after this, so I'll be traveling across country. I'm doing my cross country travel. No, I'm going to Florida, and then I'm going across the northern part of the country, visiting with some of our congregants who live in Idaho. I'm visiting with the Monheims and the Robins who live in Montana now, and seeing some family and doing some other stuff in the Montana to Idaho to Minnesota area in the coming days. So, and trying to enjoy life too, trying to do some of that as well. And this is continuing that theme is this section right here in chapter 6, Rosemary.
There is an evil I have observed under the sun, and a grave one it is for mortals, that God sometimes grants a man riches, property, and wealth, so that he does not want for anything his appetite may crave. But God does not permit him to enjoy it. Instead, a stranger will enjoy it. That is futility and a grievous ill.
Yeah, that's really bugs him. That really bugs this guy, Ecclesiastes guy, Kohelet, the man. Whoa. What happens when someone works a long time and then he dies? It's very troubling. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people that literally pass away a year after they go into retirement. Yeah.
Very common.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one, right? Yeah. So that breaks his whole thing, right? That's just like, what's going to happen then? Which of course then begs the question, maybe you got to enjoy life before you retire, right? So, but again, when it happens, when someone dies, in their 50s or 60s, when they just kind of reach the time when they should be cutting back a little bit and enjoying a little bit more time, oof, he just says, oh, that just gets me. And it does, it gets us. But here's what he says about that.
Even if a man should beget 100 children and live many years, no matter how many the days of his years may come to, if his gullet is not sated through his wealth, I say, the stillbirth, though it was not even accorded a burial, is more fortunate than he.
Yeah, it goes back to the person who's not born. Yeah, somebody who does have a long life and who does have a lot of kids and who has, the time to enjoy these things. If they're not happy with it, if they never feel satisfied, then they are never, that's terrible. That's also terrible. Actually, in a way, he says it's even worse. Better for you not to have been born than to have an inability to ever be satisfied. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's interesting. When he says a stranger,
Yep.
to me that guidance you get.
Could be.
Whatever the bargain is, in other words, that person, that strength, in other words, you're not going to, whatever you've got, it doesn't matter. It's not going to give you happiness.
Well, once somebody else, yes, if you don't, yes, if you're not the one to enjoy it, it's terrible. You're probably talking about a guy who died, whose wife then goes marries another guy, and this guy's living off of what that's what he's really talking about. He's really talking about that guy. And of course, it could go for a woman now too, right? A woman worked real hard. She dies, her husband inherits the money, and then there's a new woman there that's inheriting. Ugh. Gosh, I sometimes think about that. I'm like, I could never marry somebody if my wife died, because her ghost would haunt me and not let me ever. Yeah, it would be terrible, because if some other woman was enjoying the work that she put in, oh my gosh, I couldn't live with it. Feel like the ghost, I'd be inviting the ghost there. But yeah.
You'd be like Scrooge wandering that big old.
No, maybe, but I would also not, could not live with somebody enjoying, ugh. Look, it bugs him. It bugs Kohelet, and it bugs me too. It happens. It happens. But you're right, John. Maybe it's even the next generation. He just actually said that. He actually just said, even if you have kids, and a lot of kids, and he had hundreds of kids. That's one of the reasons why this could be Solomon. He had hundreds of kids. And that cannot be the source. That cannot be your enjoyment. So maybe again, it is your kids or somebody else enjoying your money. You can't get any enjoyment on it, even if it is your kids. He's saying it's not yours. It's not your enjoyment. And then the problem, of course, is that you have to enjoy it, but you actually have to enjoy it. If you don't get enjoyment out of it, if you're saying it's not enough. So it's again, that's the other balance. So the balance is, again, working hard and having enough to enjoy it and making sure, you have the time to enjoy it. That's the balance. But there's another balance, which is, can you really enjoy it? Is it enough? Do you say, oh, that's enough? Or do you say, nah, I could do more. I could be here for another week, right? On this island paradise or on this boat. I can be here another week. That's what people are living with as well. That dance. Can we reach being satisfied? So there's a very fine line there. There's a fine line to being satisfied itself. And then, to getting to that point of being satisfied. And then there's a fine line within that, which is, am I satisfied with that? Or do I need and again, of course, it's getting to the fact that, well, maybe I have to work harder. I'll have to get more so I can spend more time doing this. I spend 1 week away on vacation. Next year, I'm going to spend 2 weeks away on vacation. But, is there a limit, right? Will I ever be happy? Well, can I be happy? So you probably have to be happy, but you can't ever be completely happy with it. Otherwise, you're not going to want to do more, even in enjoyment. But again, you have to always balance it, right? You have to have a healthy balance, but you have to enjoy it. You have to. I tell people, I believe that you have to. So, let's read a little bit more.
Though it comes into futility and departs into darkness, and its very name is covered with darkness. Though it has never seen or experienced the sun, it is better off than he. Yes, even if the other lived 1,000 years twice over, but never had his fill of enjoyment. For are not both of them bound for the same place?
Yeah. So if you don't enjoy it, if you don't find enjoyment, it doesn't matter whether you live thousands of years, you'll never be happy, right? So you have to have the ability to be satisfied. You have to have that. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter how long you live or how much you'll have, you'll never be happy. You have to find happiness at some level of this.
All of a person's earning is for filling the mouth, yet the gullet is not sated.
Yeah, and that's part of that. That's part of that previous lines, those previous lines too, which is again, it can't just be going into a hole, right? It's a tough look. The meaning of this is, I mean, it's probably going to say something like the meaning of this is, that's the line similar to it in Proverbs. But this idea that it can't just go into a hole, into an abyss, is the word. That's not the gullet. Is not the word. Is not the word here. What does the King James say for line 7? Oh, so it did say. It did say. It did say appetite. That's not the word that's used there, by the way. I'm not sure why they use the word gullet. I mean, you see what the word is here. If you read Hebrew, you see what this word is here. The word that they translate as gullet or appetite is the word nephesh. It literally means soul. Filling the mouth and the gullet not being satisfied is essentially saying it's going into your mouth and you're not enjoying it. It's going into a hole, which is why I translate it as like going into a hole. But that's what the meaning of it is. But it's basically saying if there's a disconnect between, understand what I'm saying here. If there's a disconnect between enjoying something or taking something, not enjoying it, scratch that. If there's a disconnect between consuming, taking something in, and finding enjoyment in it, if there's no connection there, you can never be satisfied. If you don't find enjoyment in it, it is just consuming and it will never end. The abyss can never be filled. If it's not pleasing to you, if it's not making your soul feel good, you'll never be satisfied. Lo timale, you'll never feel. That's why it says never satisfied, but you'll never be full. Sated kind of loses its meaning. I mean, there's a word for sated. Savua is the word in Hebrew, but this is sava means to be satisfied. It's not full. You're never full, which is interesting. I like that line a lot when it's read that way. If you fill your mouth to fill your mouth, your soul will never be satisfied. That's a pretty powerful line when you think about it. Very simple, but very powerful line. If you fill your mouth to fill your mouth, your soul will never be satisfied. All right.
What advantage then have the wise over the foolish? What advantage have paupers who know how to get on in life? Is the feasting of the eyes more important than the pursuit of desire? That too is futility and pursuit of wind. Whatever.
Okay, well, before we read the next line, basically saying, where does understanding any of this make sense, right? Does it give us any sense of happiness? Because this next line is a profoundly difficult line if you don't think about the whole context here.
Whatever happens, it was designated long ago, and it was known that it would happen. For as humankind, they cannot contend with the one who is stronger than they are.
Yeah, because what they just dropped here, and which again is one of the reasons why they say this is a Greek influenced text, is this type of cynicism, which is it's already been decided. There's no sense in being you can't outthink this, right? You can't strategize away this existence because it's already been foretold. It's already destined. It's already been fated.
Is this where they get some idea of predestination? Like some Christians believe that everything's decided before you're born?
Yeah. I mean, this is where look, the Greeks were really concerned with these kinds of feelings. These different competing ideas of Stoicism, cynicism, Epicureanism. Epicurean, a lot of people feel that this is an Epicurean philosophy that's really laid out here. We use the word Epicurean now mainly to describe eating good food, right? Like I'm an Epicurean, right? I'm a foodie, right? The fancy way. Before we called people foodies, we would be called an Epicurean. This is Epicurus. He lived around this time. So he lived around 300 BCE. So this dude taught that, and you can see he lived on Lesbos. He also lived in Athens. This idea is that let's see if there's a good explanation of this. When we say that pleasure is the end and aim, we do not mean the pleasures of the prodigal or the pleasures of sensuality, as we are understood to do so by ignorance, prejudice, or willful misrepresentation. By pleasure, we mean the absence of pain in the body and the trouble in the soul. It is not by an unbroken succession of drinking bouts and of revelry, not by sexual lust, nor the enjoyment of fish and other delicacies of a luxurious table, which produce a pleasant life. That's what you think it means. It doesn't, right? He says, it is a sober reasoning, searching out the grounds of every choice and avoidance, and banishing those beliefs through which the greatest tumults take possession of the soul. So it's not about just having fun. It's about really taking into consideration our lives and trying to, again, find a way of making ourselves not a simple way, not being uncomfortable. Look, the Cynics and the Stoics and some of these other philosophers they were ascetic. They gave up all pleasures. They gave up all forms of enjoyment. They literally like just sat there and just ate the very minimum to live. Did the Jews know about those kinds of philosophers? Maybe. And did they like this Epicureanism? Maybe. Because you know what's interesting is later on, when Jews talk about Greek philosophy, specifically Greek philosophy that they disagree with, they call it the people who follow the philosophy apikoros, which is the Greek word for Epicureanism. Apikoros is the word that the rabbis use for the people who follow Greek philosophy. What are they talking about? It means that people knew about this stuff. So the word apikoros in Talmud is somebody who follows Greek philosophy. Specifically, again, you can see how popular it was. Here, I'll just show you real quick. This is Epikoros or apikoros. There it is. We use the word even in Yiddish. And sometimes it means a cynic. And it also would sometimes refer to someone who doesn't believe in the world to come. Well, you can understand why, because some of this seemed a little bit rejectionist of the world to come. So you can see that the Epicurean or the Apikoros here, all of Israel has a share in the world to come, but the following have no part in the world to come. One who says the resurrection of the dead is not biblical. Well, you can see the rabbis are saying it's in the Bible. Well, they know it's not in the Bible, but they're telling you it's in the Bible. You just got to find it. Or the Torah is not from heaven. Or the Epicurean. The Epicurean's listed with those. The Apikoros is with those. Well, clearly this is a Jew. All these people are Jewish, right? It's all Israel. So the people of Israel who aren't are the people who are not like the rabbis. You got to believe these things. And look, they just throw out the word Epikoros. So these were people that are following Greek philosophy. So this Greek philosophy was so powerful, so popular, maybe because it's the foundation of the book of Ecclesiastes, that this very much affected Judaism into the extension of like, okay, this is Epicurean philosophy. So it's possible. Sounds very Epicurean. All right. Let's finish this chapter.
Often, much talk means much futility. How does it benefit a person? Who can possibly know what is best for people to do in life? The few days of this fleeting life. For who can tell what the future holds for them under the sun?
And that's that phrase again, Tachat HaShemesh. That's why this seems to be consistent. Like there seems to be a consistent writer in this. But again, who can tell you, right? Who can tell you what's going to happen, right? Who can possibly know? That is the way we're going to end today. Who can possibly know? And that's what we talk about here is the end of the day, it has to come from within you, right? And of course, there's some of this is nobody can tell you. You can't tell yourself because we don't know. You don't know. You don't know how much longer you have. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know if you're going to open the door and fall down the stairs. You don't know. So that means we have to be at least prepared for the fact that whatever we're doing, that we're going to find enjoyment in the day that we have in front of us. So there's a very, very beautiful kind of, we were extended to this yet last week, and this invitation exists today as we finish this. Again, we'll miss you over the next couple of weeks, but how do we enjoy today? How do we have fun in this moment? Learning that we got to work, and but we have to have a good time too. I feel like I've at least imparted this onto my kids because my daughters went last night to see the Beyonce concert at SoFi, which was not, I like Beyonce, but I'm not really wild about her country album. But my girls both worked real hard. They worked during the week, during the day, and then they went to the concert last night. So I'm glad to see that they seem to understand this too, that you work hard, but you also need to enjoy life. And when you know that you've imparted that onto the next generation, I don't know what religious meaning I've imparted on them. I hope I've imparted some on them. I think I have, but the importance of understanding that life on a philosophical level, they've got to enjoy it, and they have to balance work with also enjoying life is something that it seems that they've got. So I feel comfortable. With that. I enjoy watching them enjoy life. So I guess that's also a good thing too, to make sure that the people that we care about, the people we love, are enjoying life and having a good time. That should hopefully bring us some enjoyment too, but we have to have it for ourselves. Can't just live vicariously through other people. We have to enjoy it ourselves. So I hope everyone has a good rest of the week. We'll be having our Wednesday night class. We had some people who were here today that aren't normally here. So it was nice to see a couple people pop on. And we'll see what happens in the coming days. That I'm hoping that, as we go into Yom Ha'atzmaut, we go into Israel Independence Day, that we have to get these hostages they have to be free. Tonight is Yom HaZikaron, is the Israel Memorial Day, and then Wednesday night to Thursday is Yom Ha'atzmaut. So these next days, I'm hoping, I don't know, who knows, but these people have to come home. This war has to come to an end, and people have to, Hamas cannot be in power no matter what. So we will see you guys soon, and stay well and have some good times, please. We'll see you. And we have Friday night services with Rick and Addie are going to be here again this week. They switched with Wendy. So Rick and Addie this Friday, and then our Israel Goes Country Festival on Sunday. You got to come. And we are going to have whiskey tasting. So even if you don't want the chili, you can have the whiskey. But yes, my chili will be there. So it's one of the things that I enjoy, is watching people hopefully enjoy some food and drink. You'll have an opportunity to do that Sunday at 4:00. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.